3 o'clock, and we like to try to start on the hour and finish up. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Committee members filter in. Our first subject area is going to be the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and we can keep talking out there, but we'll never get done today. So my vice chair just says cut the budget. We can make it quick. We'll be done.
I believe that motion doesn't have a second, so I think it will fail for one of us.
Maybe.
All right. We are privileged to have our interim director, Scott Dutton, and our chief financial officer, Connie Buck. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much for the service that your agency, that you both provide to the state of Georgia, but also to the men and women of your agency. They do a fantastic job, and based upon the emails that I get on a regular basis, they have their hands full. So appreciate your time to be here today. And if you will go ahead and walk us through your track sheet. We're on page 14 of the track sheet. This is section 30. Page 14 of your track sheet, you'll find the GBI.
Okay, we do have statewide changes. Would you prefer me to go over those or just skip right over to the?
I'm sorry, page 13 will be the beginning. Let's go, no, skip the statewide changes. We got those.
We'll start with 30-.3. Okay, so for the dollar figure there, the 803,000 some change is for the 5 additional scientists and 1 lab technician specifically for the chemistry division within the crime lab. And the purpose behind that is to address the backlog in the lab. Most of it having to do with, it's over 50% of the backlog is chemistry in nature.
You have a crime lab at Pooler, right? Pooler Crime Lab, is that,
yes.
Is that for this, or is this for?
This is for our headquarters complex. We do have a crime lab in the Savannah area. The construction of the Pooler lab would be completed in June of this year, and doors should open June or July of this year.
And do you have an anticipated O&M cost for that?
Well, so actually, with regard to that, there's operating costs associated with the new facility, and a lot of that based on square footage issues, things that we dropped the ball on from the standpoint of identifying that increase based on going from, I think it was about 18,000 square feet to over 50,000 square feet to adequately for electric and everything else.
But you had a huge expansion there, so with
Absolutely.
this facility, so just an underestimation of the anticipated O&M for that facility. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
And is that the estimated amount to cover that, to cover the O&M for that large of that expanded facility is going to be what?
Let's see, I have the
It's
511,000.
Okay.
Now I will say that we've OPB's aware of that. We've been in conversation with them as it relates to that. So we're working through those issues, and discussions are ongoing concerning that.
Well, in my many years of doing this, this is the first time that this is the first time that I've seen GBI make an estimate mistake, I guess it is. But I know that you've underestimated the size and operation of the building, so we're here to fix it. We can look at it and take a look at that for the budget.
Thank you.
You said you have 11 positions for the cyber crime center, and that's item 30.4.6. Is that right?
That is correct. So this was the remaining portion of the cyber center. So last year, FY19, about half of the staffing was funded. This is the remainder of that. That would include another supervisor, 4 special agents, digital forensic investigators, and admin support.
Is the cyber crime center, is that assisting in the online human trafficking?
So for the most part, our child exploitation unit handles those particular type cases, but they're very similar in their setup and their function. I would consider the cyber center is everything other than that. So any kind of criminal activity that involves computers, storage devices, things of that nature, intrusion cases, those would be through the cyber center.
And does that include the investigation and the of devices that are used in the commission of a crime?
Yes.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so moving further down, the 30-4.7. This is part of the GBI Gang Task Force, and the governor's request provides for a prosecutor liaison and 2 senior investigators. And I will tell you from the discussions I've had with our incoming director, Reynolds, they've been very limited. This is a priority discussion, so we're in the early stages of mapping through how that's actually going to be addressed.
Got an alarm going off there. Okay. What is a prosecutor liaison going to do? I'm
not 100% certain on the end of how we push these things out, but from the standpoint of gang prosecutions, it requires a special skill set in RICO cases and criminal prosecution across the board as it relates to gang activity. That's one aspect of it. Prosecuting Attorneys Council has been very instrumental in providing that level of training to many of the prosecutors. I think the intent here is for the prosecutor or a prosecutor who understands these cases can help on the front end before investigations and operations start to really engage A to Z on working those cases.
Yeah, because my understanding is that the PAC already has in their they have a specialized team, special prosecutors that deal with murder convictions, murder cases, as well as gang-related. So I'm wondering whether we need this in GBI or not, or PAC can't just provide this assistance directly.
I'll leave that question, if it's okay, for Director Reynolds, who will be official in Monday of next week, Monday of next week. Quite frankly, I mean, our discussions had not been to the level of really dissecting how this is going to fit into an overall statewide gang strategy.
All right, Chairman Ballinger has a question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to kind of point out for the committee's edification that I do know that there is a specialized prosecution unit within the Cobb District Attorney's Office from which Director Reynolds is coming, headed by, I believe, Jesse Evans is the prosecutor there. We've heard a lot of the gang bills that have come through. Administrative Floor Leader Reeves has carried a number of those gang bills, so I do kind of understand that that's kind of where they're coming from. So I think that's kind of what incoming Director Reynolds was wanting to kind of carry on. So it's my understanding, at least.
Okay.
And continuing on through the bonds, 50-2-3-48, the $3.9 million having to do with our Thompson Regional Office, which will be a dual-purpose office, funding set up for that. 50.2-3-49, 100 replacement vehicles for our agents. 50.2.3.5, replace and upgrade lab equipment statewide, and that's $4.5 million. 50.2.3.51, and that's to replace the GCIC message switch. That's a $2 million price tag.
The vehicles that you're replacing, what's the mileage on those vehicles?
The standard replacement vehicle mileage point is 135,000 miles. We'll actually be in a neighborhood of about 160 vehicles that will be over that 135,000 mile mark, but this goes a long way with helping us get our inventory where it needs to be.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you. No, we have a question. Chair
I do
Bowser.
apologize. On the request for the cyber crime facility, now that I know from school safety, and forgive me, that was a long time ago. But that's where the See Something, Say Something app. It doesn't go there.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
That's our Homeland Security section,
Okay.
for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Interim Director Dutton, the 11 positions, the request before was for 22, is that right? And so it's half of last year, and you're adding the 11 from this year, is that correct?
That's correct. And of course, it was split up in different formats. So it'll be a total of 6 special agents, 2 agent supervisors, a total of 10 digital forensic investigators that would include a supervisor and admin support.
Is there a number of those positions that you could do without?
That being a new unit, and they've opened the doors 50% of staffing, and they're probably well past 70% request for investigation. So I think that's going to be the up and coming unit that's going to require a lot of manpower and resources. So that's a critical area.
Okay. All right, other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is going to be from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Executive Director Jay Neal and Deputy Director Stephen Hatfield are here. I think also Judge Brenda Weaver, is she here with us today? Yes, there she is. And then our Accountability Courts, Taylor Jones, she's the Executive Director. Ms. Taylor, are you here today?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll talk to you in just a minute about the Accountability Courts. So if you'll go to section 30.6, which is on page 14, so the next page of you'll see the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do want to, before we start talking about the numbers, if it's okay, share with you a little bit about our agency over the course of the past year. We have some just little 4-pagers with some stats that we had printed up. We didn't have enough to give everybody today, but we've got an order of them coming in. Hopefully next week we'll get these in your hands. But I did want to touch on a couple of things. Well, CJCC works collaboratively with very, very many partners, both in public safety and government agencies and non-government agencies. In your communities, we have quite a number of partners that we work with. We're able to impact Georgians in all 159 counties during the darkest times of their lives, not directly, but indirectly through those partners, through our victim services grants primarily, but we also have the accountability courts grants and the juvenile justice incentive grants, so there's criminal justice grants as well that have a positive impact within your communities. And I just wanted to share one thing. Deputy Director Stephen Hatfield and myself just a couple days ago went to Forsyth County Juvenile Court, and we saw one of our CASA teams. We fund about $6 million a year to CASA here in the state of Georgia. You have CASA volunteers probably in your district, CASA teams in your district. And we witnessed a CASA volunteer being a part of a procedure within the juvenile court there in Forsyth County with a 14-year-old girl and her mother, who was a part of the felony drug court program. And they have a very, very difficult history. This girl had been raised by her grandparents primarily and had an altercation with a grandfather that led to her being put in RYDC for a few months. She's on probation for 3 years. And they are now 2 months away from reunification with this mother and this 14-year-old, and to hear one person after another get up in the court and talk about the incredible changes they've seen both in the 14-year-old girl and the mother, and it's impressive to see. And that's just one example of how our partners are making an impact around the state. Through our juvenile justice program, we had 12,327 total individuals, and that's juveniles and adults impacted through our criminal justice grants. As an agency, we distributed $142 million last year in grants and victim compensation expenditures. And through our victim services grants, we served 272,642 victims around the state of Georgia. That's 272,642 victims served around the state of Georgia. We had $20 million paid out in crime victims compensation to victims of violent crime. All 159 counties in the state of Georgia had a victim that received compensation through our program. We served 14,000 victims through the crime victims compensation program. We processed 41,000 payments last year. Being administratively attached to GBI, that means that GBI processed a lot of payments for us, and we appreciate the work that GBI does on our behalf. And we appreciate the fact that that we're able to do what we're able to do with the support and the cooperation and the help of this committee in a great deal, and a great partner with us as well. We appreciate you all so very much. I'm not going to, there's a lot of other things I could talk about. Let me give you one more. We have 700 grants that we administer, 700 sub-grants that we administer to 267 different partners around the state. So you can imagine the workload that provides for our staff in managing over 700 grants around the state. There are a few items that I want to look at in the budget, a few requests that we have in this budget. 4 of those are statewide. We'll skip over those and get right into the more direct funding requests. The first one is 30.5.5, increased funds for accountability court expansion of $4.3 million. Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, Judge Weaver is with us. Taylor Jones is with us as well, and we may be able to answer some questions, but they're here also to answer questions if you all have additional questions. The Council of Accountability Court Judges does a phenomenal job with the grants that are provided by the state for the expansion of accountability court around the state. We now have accountability courts in every judicial circuit, 156 accountability courts altogether, and we're proud of the work that's being done. This increased funding will be utilized in 2 primary ways. There may be an addition of new courts coming on that will require some of those funds. Quite frankly, I envision most of those funds will be used through the building out of existing courts as they're continuing to mature, continuing to provide services to more and more participants, which we want to see. Bringing more participants into the courts requires additional funds for transportation and treatment in other areas, and the $4.3 million will help our accountability courts to continue to grow. I will say this, last year with the existing funds that we had requests from accountability courts that, if I remember correctly, was about $8 million more than we had. So the Council of Accountability Court Funding Committee had to do a great deal of trimming from the funding requests last year to be able to get down to the allocated amount of funds that we had. So this is a very significant need for our accountability courts to continue to do the fine work that they're doing within your communities. There is also a line 30.5.6, increased funds for a grant specialist position and a fidelity monitor. And I'll give you a little bit of a background on those and a little breakdown. Actually, it would have been better for one of these positions to be in our budget and the other position to be in the Council of Accountability Court Judges budget. The one for our budget is grant specialist. That is $65,154. That is for salary and benefits. It's a $40,000 salary for a grant specialist to support the accountability courts. We have 156 accountability courts that are funded. We have one grant specialist that is currently funded to work these 156 grants. So the workload is exceptionally high. We are at that place now to where we need another grant position to be able to provide the service that we want to provide to our accountability courts, and I believe that the level of service that you would want us to provide to those accountability courts as well. The other position is $80,472 for salary and benefits. It is a $50,000 a year salary. It is for a accountability courts fidelity monitor. As you're probably aware, anytime you have evidence-based programming, if you don't adhere to the model, if you're not adhering to the fidelity of the model, you lose your evidence base. And it's important for us to be able to get the benefit from the accountability courts that I think that you want us to be receiving. Is we've got to have accountability courts that are adhering to the models. And right now, the Council of Accountability Courts simply, quite frankly, and I'll say this, Taylor might not be this straightforward with it, but I will be. They desperately need this position to be able to provide the fidelity monitoring that is required with 156 funded accountability courts in Georgia. So that is another vital position as well. The next line item for us is line item 30.7.1, the Family Violence Program. This fund is to increase funds to provide support for an additional domestic violence shelter and 6 additional sexual assault centers, a total of $390,000. We currently provide funds for 48 domestic violence shelters and 34 sexual assault centers in the state of Georgia. Most of those, we provide grant funding, federal grant funding for all those shelters. Most of those receive state grant funding as well. We have 2 domestic violence shelters that do not receive the state funding. They only receive the federal funding that comes through our agency. We have 11 sexual assault centers in the state that do not receive state funding. They only receive the federal funding. We requested funds to be able to bring these centers online and to be able to receive some state funding for these centers. The reason that's critical for our domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers is there's so much restriction on the uses, the eligible expenditures for those federal funds. They have to be direct services. There are a lot of inherent expenses in a domestic violence shelter and sexual assault center that they're having to figure out how, if they're not receiving those state funds, they're having to figure out how to raise funds on a local level to provide some of those basic needs to be able to operate those shelters and those centers. I think it's important for us to be able to provide that state fund for all of these certified shelters and centers instead of just the ones that have been receiving it. This is the ones that are receiving it have been historically receiving it for a number of years. When the funding for domestic violence shelters and sexual assault centers came to our agency a number of years ago, these were the ones that were receiving it. It has continued to be just those shelters during the time that we've had the funding. We believe it's time for us to begin to offer that funding for the additional shelters and centers as well.
Representative Williams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned the local domestic violence centers and fundraising. Down in Liberty County, I've found that they're almost constantly having to raise money. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, this is not a priority for most people until they need it. Mm-hmm. So this is not one of those fundraisers where folk want to be in the newspaper holding a glass of champagne to show they gave. Mm-hmm. It's tough. And it is something that, no matter what time of night, you get folk out. Mm-hmm. We had a shelter was given. Most of their work has been because of private fundraising, and it's tougher and tougher as the caseload increases.
And some shelters do a better job. For some of them, they do a better job because they live in an area where it's easier to raise funds. Some of the shelters and centers that need the funds the most are those that are in the rural parts of the state where fundraising is very difficult, quite frankly. Just as an FYI, the domestic violence shelters that are not currently funded through the state grant is Serenity House in Moultrie and Center for Pan-Asian Services in Lawrenceville. The 11 sexual assault centers that do not currently receive state funds are the Douglas County Task Force, the Connie Smith Rape Crisis Golden Islands Children's Center, the International Women's House in DeKalb, Harmony House in Royston, Statesboro Regional Sexual Assault Center, the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center expanded into sexual adult services and received no sexual assault funds there. Tifton Judicial Circuit Shelter, Inc., which is Ruth's Cottage. Gateway Child Advocacy Center, which is also expanded to adult sexual assault services. Lighthouse Children's Advocacy Center, which is expanded as well. The Treehouse Advocacy Center has also expanded to adult sexual assault services, and the Greenhouse Child Advocacy and Sexual Assault Center. Those sexual assault centers receive no state grant funds, and we're requesting those additional funds so that we can begin providing some state funding for these shelters and centers.
Speaking to, the fundraising aspect, one of the things that I've noticed, in my friends, just kind of on a personal level, that many of them work in sexual assault centers, child advocacy centers, that sort of thing. We have seen our VOCA grant funds just expand exponentially over the last, and one of the things that I think fundraising allowed for was community buy-in, community involvement.
Right.
And as more and more government funds have kind of come along, I've seen kind of an insular nature kind of coming. There's less community involvement, there's less volunteers, there's less. It's just kind of, they're over there kind of doing their thing, taking care of, what they need to be taking care of. But there's just that kind of, that intersection of community and community support. However it looked, that's been diminishing over time. Are there any do you have any plans to address that, I guess? Because I have seen kind of them just kind of turning more inward, and they're getting about their business, and they're doing very important work, obviously, and they're my friends, and they they need help, and I'm not begrudging that, but I do think that that's an issue that they're kind of going to move off into this island by themselves, and there isn't community awareness, and there's just so many things that come from that. Not, money of which is not the, probably certainly not in the top 5 as far as the importance of that community participation and involvement. So can you speak to, is there any move to address that?
So as the VOCA funds have increased, we've been able to provide a great deal more federal funds. And our shelters and centers have been able to provide services that they didn't provide before, expand their services, do a better job at reaching those who are underserved, for example, and so there are a lot of things that they're able to do to improve the access and the services that they provide in their community. We have noticed that there are some shelters and some centers, some of our nonprofits that do a phenomenal job with board development, with local fundraising, and we certainly encourage them to continue to do that. We are seeing some that the board development isn't what it needs to be. Local fundraising is not what it needs to be. Part of our responsibility at CJCC is we do regular site visits. There are a number of things that we look at on the site visits. We do look at the funding streams that they have, both from the federal grants and the state funding streams, as well as the local funding streams. We provide technical assistance for the boards. We challenge them if we see the centers and the shelters that are not as engaging in the community as they should be, and we feel like that they need to be more robust in their local development and fundraising. We provide the technical assistance needed for them to access that kind of that local development. We have some consultants that we can contract with to send them in and do an evaluation with the board. And help them put together a plan for board development and local fundraising. So it is absolutely a need, and we are working through our Victim Services Division to try to help those shelters and centers address that.
Yeah, it's more kind of the anecdotal. Whenever you have the community members kind of coming and going, a lot of jobs come from that. For I know domestic violence folks, in particular. Whenever they, a young lady I knew, she got a bookkeeping job with a landscape company who volunteered his services and came and cut the grass. So, it's a lot of that. Just I don't know. It's just kind of that enmeshing, that embedding in the community that I think they're kind of moving away from. So, any kind of policy that the CJCC would put forward to address that, I think would be a benefit.
Without going into much details, we do have a lot of other agencies to go through, but I think it's important to know, you can tell us this offline, but to what extent does the local shelter have to raise local dollars in order to pull down these VOCA matches? So is there still a motivation in terms of coming up with local matching funds to pull those dollars down?
There is a federal match, and
No, not the federal match, means there a local match.
there's a local match for the federal grants.
Okay.
Yes, there's a local match required for those federal grants. With the VOCA funds, since the fund has increased tremendously, there are opportunities to apply for match waivers on not grandfathered on the previously granted funds, but the additions that are coming in through the expansion of federal.
Well, as you think about it, I think the chairman's right. I mean, I think that when you have skin in the game, then it means more to you, not to say that the services aren't being provided, but it has to be a community effort.
Yeah,
And I think that
absolutely.
that to Representative Williams' point, having the community involved is important because it decreases awareness. And these things don't need to be placed in the shadows. We need to understand that it happens, and we need to be willing to address it.
Absolutely.
As a community, local community.
Absolutely, and we'll continue to work through our technical assistance and through the site visits. We'll continue to work with our centers to build out that board support and local participation.
$4.3 million is a significant amount of money, and I think there needs to be a more definite statement as to how that money is going to be applied. So in the interest of time, could you provide us an allocation of how that 4.3 is going to be allocated? What's the intended purpose? I know it says expansion, but what are we expanding? Which courts are anticipated to expand? What services are going to be provided?
So the nature of the grant process through the Council of Accountability Court judges, where the applications come in to the council, the judges on the Council of Accountability Court funding committee will then go through those requests and allocate those out based upon the request that comes in. First by eliminating, and Judge Weaver can speak to this more if you would like for her to, but first by eliminating any funding that's not eligible.
That would be good. We can have Judge Weaver come and talk to us a bit more about that.
Excellent.
And we'll just transition right over to the accountability courts. That's a good segue. Jay, thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I very seldom disagree with Director Neal, but we actually have 160 accountability courts.
Yep.
We had 156 in July, but one of the items that you ask us this year is make sure that the courts are using their money wisely. So if monies are not used, then they're returned to us. And so in the fall of last year, we were able to fund 3 additional veterans courts, 2 mental health courts, and a family treatment court based upon monies that we retrieved from courts who were not able to use that.
Very good.
So what we are hoping to do is to add additional courts with the additional money we're asking for. One of the things that this committee has urged us to do is to expand the number of participants, first of all, in each court. So in order to do that, we got some statistics together, some research about the number of individuals in each circuit who would qualify for accountability courts. So we came up with a percentage initially and sent out letters to each of the judges saying, based upon the population, the number of defendants who would meet these qualifications, then we're urging you to increase the numbers in your courts. And that has worked out extremely well. We're also continuing to work on, even though we have an accountability court in each circuit, we are really wanting to have a felony drug court in each circuit, because that court is the one that has the highest numbers. For example, in my circuit, we have like 120 in the felony drug court, probably 28 in the Veterans Court, about 54 in the mental health court, and about 45 maybe in the family treatment court. So you can see it's the felony drug court that has the highest numbers. Well, in order to do that and to reach our burden of being high risk, high need, that involves a lot of additional treatment hours. In order to meet the treatment criteria for the individuals who are high risk, high need, or even moderate risk, that's 9 to 12 hours of treatment per week for each participant. Treatment is not cheap, and when you have more participants, that means I've got to have more compliance officers who are going out at night and on the weekends to double check our participants. That means more drug screens. That means more individuals to monitor the drug screens. So as we increase the numbers in courts that we already have in place, that increases the expenses.
How did you come up with the 4.3 million?
It was based upon some of the statistics that we had last year from the number of courts applying and the number of participants, and we're projecting that we would be able to probably go from the 160, hopefully get closer to 170 in courts, and estimating the amount of money that we would need to properly treat those participants in those courts.
Okay.
Taylor, you may have more
Representative
information.
Williams has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for what you do, but I need some clarification, and I really don't know. When you move to the felony drug court, the small seller and the small user, the misdemeanor, where are we going with this when we get to the felony? The person that has reached the point where they qualify for a felony, are we I'm just looking at the person who's big time, who's doing some things significant. Is he back out there on the street, or she back out there on the street doing the same thing?
You're talking about recidivist rates.
I'm talking about moving. You want to go more into the felony drug court.
Yes.
I just want you to break the two down and see what do you really expect to achieve with the felony drug court?
With the felony drug court, what I'm trying to achieve in my court is that the individuals who graduate and recover will no longer be coming into the criminal justice system over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I expect them to be working full-time unless they're on some type of disability. I expect them to be paying child support if they're under a court order to do so, or if the children are in their home to support their own children. I expect them to pay taxes and to be a productive citizen. And if they continue to be on probation, which some are, then they will be monitored. And some are pre-adjudicated cases in which if that means they plead guilty, but if they graduate from drug court, then their case is dismissed, which allows a lot of professional individuals. For example, I have in my Veterans Court, I have a nurse who is graduating next Tuesday night. Their employer is aware of their involvement in drug court and has kept them working and will continue to keep them working. So we expect them to exhibit the things I just mentioned. Now, do we succeed with everyone? No, but I can assure you, based upon the studies that we have completed in the last 2 years, that the recidivist rate for those who are even in drug court for a small period of time is much better than those who have never been into any type of accountability court, or comparing them to individuals of similar characteristics from other circuits.
We've asked for measurables. Yeah, we've asked for measurables on that, so we have them, and
Yes.
I want to get those answers, but we have been going.
Sorry.
We've already had 4.5 hours of hearings on various agencies, and so I know. So we're in thin on this
Okay.
committee. So
I
we'll.
could talk all night on accountability
I-
courts, but
We noticed that.
I believe you. I believe you. But Representative Williams, would you mind? Could we move on to the next question, or do you need to follow up?
Just quickly, And I don't want to belabor, but I do think there's some points where we might need a little more time. Because I want to make sure I understand this. As I'm kind of from the old school, and I don't want my conservative friends to get happy. When I raised 5 boys, and the rule was, if you get an addiction, I'm going to help you. If you're a seller, you're on your own, don't call me.
Well, and you're exactly correct.
If you're charged with possession, like if you're charged with possession of methamphetamine or something like that, that's a felony. So you would go into a felony drug court. You're not necessarily trafficking. You're not necessarily selling. So it's just what you have.
Let's take the Representative Williams up on his offer or his proposal that we circle back to this and talk more about those things. That's more substantive as to the process and the outcome, and not the budget requests that are here.
Does that drive the budget?
What it does. It does, Al. It does. But what I'm saying is we don't have time to do all that right now. So what I'd like to do is come back to it. I'm offering to make that. And if you don't want to do that, then we okay. So we'll come back to it and we'll revisit this issue a little bit more detail, and we'll get with and schedule a time for that.
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. We're gonna have a question from. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Would you like me to stay and maybe?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll do that.
Good. All right, so we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. As the Department of Juvenile Justice, Section 31 of your track sheet on page 15 of your track sheet. And we are honored to have our Commissioner, Avery Niles. Thank you for being here. And Andrew Larhoven is also with him. Thank you. He's our CFO for the department. Thank you for being here this morning. So join us on page 15 of the track sheet, sections 31.
And Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting us. Do you want me to forego the statewide adjustments?
Yes,
and those-
everyone forego state. Just focus on the requests that are not state requests.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And we'll move right on to 31.16, 31.3.7, and 31.4.7. And that's the governor's recommendation to provide the funds for certified teachers. In our system, we're the 181st school district, and we have some 140 of full-time certified school teachers. That's that item, Mr. Chair. With no questions, we'll move on to the next item, 31.2.7, and that's to provide governor's recommendation for an increased fund for 7 public safety training officers. We have an academy here in Georgia down at Gypstick, and we have a very limited number of classes that's being taught there, and we have to take those services out to our 26 facilities and 96 court service offices. And these 7 new public safety instructors will help with the curriculum deliverables out in the field, and we can attract more of those employees out in the field than we can sending them to the center. So we would ask for your favorable recommendation in that.
On your teachers, certified teachers, are we, is this going to cover all teachers or just certified teachers? And is there a distinction within your school district?
So it will cover all of our educators. Some of those have specialty degrees, and I just use the terminology of certified because they all are certified through the state.
Okay, so are there any that are part of this, a part of the system that are not going to be covered by the terminology certified?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Okay, all right. Questions over here, Representative Bruce.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still learning, so if question is not the right question for them, just correct me. But you aware of this point system that they have for these kids? They get arrested, and if they don't have enough points, they send them back home. I guess where I was going with this is you talk about training. Instead of sending them back home, I was wondering if there was money available or requested to force them into some kind of training.
Those trainers, Mr. Chair, are for our certified officers. to deliver the curriculum for those officers, those staff members that need to be trained.
Okay, so that's for a different group, okay.
No, it's a good question. So it'll be for a different subject matter.
Yes, sir.
So this is just gonna be these are just your trainers that will help train your entire various members of the staff, right?
That is correct, sir.
Other questions, member of the committee? All right, seeing none, we thank you very much, Commissioner, for being here.
You don't want me to finish?
I'm sorry, yeah. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to save money and go on. I tell you, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. All right.
We cut that part out, Adrian.
Yeah.
The next item, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee, is 31.3.6, and that's for a expanding of our CTAE programs that we're giving our kids an opportunity to learn and partner with the technical college system of Georgia to provide those kids that's not necessarily focus in on going to a higher school of learning, but they want to get out and work. The CTAEs, I believe we will bring those partnerships that the technical college system offer into our system to provide those services that for those technical kids that software, welding, forklift operators, and automotive type programs that we're bringing inside.
That's fantastic.
All right. And then the last item, Mr. Chair, would be the analyzer for Cadwell. Cadwell is a new facility that we opening this month down in Lawrence County. It replaces the facility in Eastman that was built in 1967. So this is to true up those funds to make it a full 12-month operational issue.
Good. Anything else?
I can talk longer, but we can go to capital.
Yeah.
And we only asking for 8.4 million, and the first item is the facility repair and sustainability or sustainment.
And these are your bond requests.
That is correct.
So the new members, when we're talking about capital requests, these will be the bond requests that are not on your track sheet, but are part of the bond requests from the department. But go ahead.
Yes, sir, and the next item would be the facility major improvement and renovation, and that covers 4.25 million and give us a total of the request of 8.45.
Good.
That's what I have for you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can. Thank you, sir, and we appreciate your favorable recommendations.
Commissioner, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is pardons and paroles, section 35, page 18 of your track sheet. Chris Barnett, Executive Director, is here. Lisa Reed, our Fiscal Services Director, is also with him.
Hey, how's it going? No comment. I got you taken care of. Us Liberty County's got to stay together.
Since ankle monitor's off, I can see from here.
We'll be checking up on him later. Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about the State Board of Pardons and Paroles. I'll get right to it. We have 5 program-specific changes. The first you will find under the Board Administration Program, line 35.1.6. This is a transfer of funds in the amount of $30,932 from the Department of Community Supervision to the State Board of Pardons and Paroles to reflect expenditures in teamwork building. Since the creation of the Department of Community Supervision and the transfer of personnel between the agencies, there have been some fluctuations in teamwork's building. We've solved this over the last previous 2 years through an MOU with the Department of Community Supervision, who has been great working with us. I want to thank them for their support and partnership. But this transfer seeks to make this a permanent adjustment to the TeamWorks billing, as it seems that it has stabilized. Our next line item is 35.1.7. This is the transfer of 10 positions from the Clemency Division Program to the Board Administration Program. This recommendation comes from the Office of Planning and Budget. out of the zero-based budgeting process. The recommendation is to move those 10 positions from one program budget to another. No new funds, no new positions. This is simply an administrative transfer of positions. Under our clemency division program, again, you'll see line 35.2.5, which is just a repeat of what we just said, just in reverse order. Line number 35.2.6 is an increase of $158,792 for 2 additional criminal investigator positions. As the prison population has become more violent and complex, the board seeks to increase the utilization of its post-certified law enforcement investigator positions to provide the initial field legal investigations on those most serious offenses and provide timely interviews of offenders throughout their incarceration period so that multiple screenshots or snapshots of those individuals can take place over time. As there are in some cases, the board will not see that individual until 60 years after their original commitment to prison. So we want to make sure that we're tracking them through that to see any progress that occurs. If you remember, the House Appropriations and amended FY19 budget recommendations included moving one-time funds to the FY20 budget to provide ongoing funds for vehicles and operations for the criminal investigator positions, and that is in the amount of $15,510. And then my last item here is 35.2.7 is an increase of $196,977 for military leave and salary expenses for one of our employee positions. This is continuing funds from our amended 19 budget for an employee who is expected to return from an extended military activation.
Mr. Director, let me go back to the transfer of administrative positions that we're moving from clemency back up to the Board of Administration. Is there going to be any need to backfill those positions within the clemency decision division?
No, sir.
Okay. Right. Questions from members of the committee? All right. Seeing none, we thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Department of Public Safety. Colonel McDonough, joined by Major Jason Johnson, and Amy Stansel as the comptroller will be my co-chairman here wants to give you props for some Smokey the Bandit comments in the last presentation.
Well, we won't hold up on the car wash today. We get the tone, so
Yeah.
Put your seatbelt on. If you turn to the first page, under our Field Services Division, this is we're asking for 20 additional positions, which will include 10 canine handlers. This is to bolster our criminal interdiction unit with a total cost of $2,447,496. The next page kind of shows you where we're going with this, with the opioid crisis. I'd pause just for a minute and say to you that with that said, methamphetamine is still king, and even though it's still king, cocaine is still queen. So we talk a lot about opioids today, but folks are still being poisoned for the use of methamphetamine. That's 39.4.5 on your sheet. The next one is 39.4.6. That's increased funds for a 50-man trooper school. The ask is $2,469,073. That's the 108th Trooper School. That's to start in September of this year. The next is to provide funds for the Office of Public Safety Support. This is from House Bill 703 last year. That's line 39.6.1, and that's 1.3 million. We asked for the cars and amended. This is to bolster an office of 11 people for peer support. And I think what everybody needs to know is this office has been placed under us, but this is to provide peer support for everybody in public safety. Firefighters, dispatchers, radio operators, police officers, anybody. And this is local government, state government. It doesn't matter, what you are or what element you are in public safety. It's to provide that mental health connection to try to get through certain problems through a peer support aspect, or if not, through professional help and through seminars that are called critical incident support seminars or sudden traumatic loss seminars. The last thing, Mr. Chairman, is our bond request. Those are lines 50.2.3.54, 0.55, 0.56, and 0.57. That's for 227 vehicles at $9.6 million. Our major facilities and maintenance repairs. We have over 70 facilities throughout the state. That's $600,000. The replacement of post 33 in Milledgeville. The reason why we're asking for bond funding for that is because we've actually sold the property that the post is on. We have possession of that property, so we're trying to recoup the funds. The hospital authority there is actually giving us land. So it's a very unique circumstance where we're trying to recoup that from the general fund from the sale with that land to replace the post that's there. And then the last is a request for a new headquarters building for design funds. That's 2.97, it's line 0.57 as I mentioned, and that's based upon GISFIX model for the amount of people that we have in our building and the square footage costs that we would need for planning. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's about as brief as I can be.
No, that's great. On the vehicles, what's the mileage you cycle them out? When you cycle your vehicles out, what is the mileage number that you go?
135,000 miles. Currently, we've got 119 vehicles that are 135,000 miles or greater.
Okay. And is that, Colonel, is that standard for all the law?
It is. It's the benchmark, sir.
Okay, all right. I seem to remember that you, and it just maybe a few years ago, that y'all had a number of vehicles that were in the 165, 170,000.
Yes, sir. I turned my vehicle in with 255,000 miles. The vehicle before that was 275,000 miles. We had a fleet average that was in excess of 145,000 miles. Now our fleet average is down to about 82 to 85,000 miles.
And that's you probably did that because you didn't want your officers riding in a higher mileage car than you were going to be doing.
The point is that I'd be the last person to get a new car, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm just pointing it out because that suits your nature.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. So good leadership. We have some questions for you. 25. Chairman Workmaster.
Speaking of nature, is it not true yesterday you were having problems getting through the turnstile and I offered to help you, but being the chief rule follower of the state, you wouldn't let me and you walked all the way around the building?
I went back to my car, found what I had lost, came back and went through myself. And I was not going to allow you to violate the state's requirement to pass me through, sir. Yes, sir. But I appreciate the intent, sir.
Representative Bruce.
Curious, what do you do with the retired canine dogs?
In some instances, sir, through our board, the people who are handlers, they end up being family pets.
Colonel, going back to your request for the Office of Public Safety Officer support, have you already identified folks that could start filling these positions?
No, sir, we have not.
Okay.
No, these will be positions that once the budget is approved, we'll put out those advertisements. We're looking for special people here. We're looking for professionals that are trained, clinical social workers or beyond that, that can identify mental health particular problems if they have to do more than peer support to get them placed in proper facilities.
And how many people do you anticipate having?
11, sir. 11 total.
11.
Yes, sir.
And tell me again, the level of training or skill or education that's going to be required for these 11.
I'll use the person that's going to run it as an example. Andy Carrier went to the University of Georgia, and he got a master's degree as a clinical social worker. This allows him to be able to make that professional determination if it's a specific mental health issue, to be able to direct them towards mental health type counseling or an institution. He can actually make a fitness for duty call. And so we'll be looking for folks that will be at that level or higher, sir.
Thank you. Other questions from members of the committee? Comments, entrapment issues that you wanted to bring up again? Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Colonel. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Major, for being here. Appreciate it. Ms. Stansel, where are you? Thank you. Next on the agenda is our Peace Officers Standards and Training Council. This will be section 39.8 on page 21 of your track sheet. And before we begin with this, Representative Williams, before you leave, just wanted to point out real quick, you have a letter here from Representative Chairman Clark and myself. As you may remember, Chairman Clark, we'd asked him to do some research on the document retention that Post had asked for in their amended budget. He has done that research. He's provided it to you in this letter so you would know. He also has introduced legislation that would roll back the duration or the length of time we have to maintain the specific records that they wanted to digitize and shred. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Yeah. So thank you for being here. Ms. Vance, go ahead and present. We were happy to have you here today. I know you couldn't make it last time, but we're happy to see you.
Thank you. Very briefly, because it's Valentine's Day and it's hearts and kisses.
That's right.
I don't have anything. I'm not asking for anything new. I just want to thank y'all for, I'm a short timer now. Thank y'all and appreciate
Well,
all the kindness you've had for me over these years.
Let us thank you for your very long service to Post and to the state of Georgia. Let us also take the opportunity to thank you because you have talked to me offline about this document retention, and just so the committee knows, the director was very appreciative of us taking proactive steps to kind of alleviate a problem that it keeps growing day by day.
Yes, sir.
So he actually reflected me or told me over here on the side that this was us looking into it was helpful. Absolutely. And as a result of what the committee was doing and the questions we've been asking, Director Vance now has the affirmative go-ahead to look for multiple vendors as opposed to just one. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That makes it a lot easier.
So, again, this is where the committee's questions and attention to detail has been helpful to the
Y'all
agency.
giving us the statutory authority to do some things and then look elsewhere. We're going to come up with a better product for everyone.
Good. Well, we thank you. Thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
Director. Yes, yes. Chairman Powell.
44 plus years as a lawman.
When's your official retirement?
Sir,
When's your official retirement?
my last day in the office will be the 15th of March.
Did you know Wyatt Earp?
And I've spent,
Yeah. Go ahead. Pull your mic up so everybody can hear you.
Probably one of the most decent individuals that I've ever dealt with.
thank you.
Of any of the departments.
Thank you.
Good humor, straightforward, and could tell you the truth. And with that,
Thank you, sir.
my applause.
All right, next up on our agenda is Public Safety Training Center. So JIPSTIC, we have Director Chris Wigington and Comptroller Cindy Jones. And we're on section 39.9, which is on page 21 of your track sheet. Director, go
Good
ahead.
afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We
Afternoon.
have nothing other than statewide changes except straight to some bond requests.
Okay, just go rattle off the bond request real quick.
Okay, it's number 58 and 59 on your track sheet. One is a 20-year bond for upgrading the sprinklers in the dormitory and then remodeling of the cafeteria.
Those are not irrigation sprinklers. We're talking about the actual fire sprinklers.
That
right?
is correct.
Okay. Good. All right. Well,
And then there's one more, number 59 is upgrading the wastewater treatment plant.
see, if you don't get it in quick enough, I just cut it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, the EPA will fine us we'll have to come back and ask for substantial more money next year to pay the EPA if we don't get it fixed.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here and your service, and I wish you a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Next on our agenda is the Office of Highway Safety. That's also on page 21 of your track sheet, is section 39.10. Alan Poole is the incoming director. Alan, welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you.
Committee, thank you all for allowing me to come to introduce myself. As you know, I'm Alan Poole. I'm a former state trooper, just retired from a state trooper.
How many
and
years?
About almost 20 years.
20 years.
And for the past 15 years, I've had the pleasure to run one of the most successful counties in the state, which is Haralson County. And it's an honor for the governor to have appointed me to lead the Office of Highway Safety.
Well, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. All right. There's no request here from the office, but we want to make sure you were here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last on our agenda is the Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council. Gordon Henderson is here, the director. Thank you, sir, for being here. And is Tony Pritchett with you?
Now, Tony sends his apologies. He got tied up, couldn't make it. He's in Gilmore County.
He probably needed to spend time with his wife.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, good. Well, we're on page 21, section 39.7.
Okay. Mainly what, I mean, I'm fine with what's in the tracking. I've got some requests that I would like to add to the budget.
Okay.
Is the reason I'm here.
Yes, sir.
If y'all look at the first section of the handout, everybody got it? We were asked to do by the OPB to do a request for 2% of the budget and for technological improvements. We need to improve our website. It is very old, very unreliable. We're taking it to move it to the cloud, and will make it a lot more beneficial for the fire departments in the state. There's some ongoing costs in there. If you go to the third page, ongoing costs in there that we would need for eventually some other updates, but for maintenance and things on the system. So I think the money they had allowed us on that was like $24,000, but it costs more than that. But if we can get to 24, we'll make it work.
And if I recall correctly, Director, you had made this request last year. I think that
Yes.
was to update that system, and it was not awarded last year. So just I wanted the new committee members to be aware of that.
Okay. All right. And on the next section is the additions that we're actually asking for this year. We're asking to add a position, and we actually asked for the same position last year, but things have kind of changed. That we need an investigator on staff to investigate some of the things we have had, and it may be due to in 2016 we required that all departments, if someone is arrested or whatever, that person and that individual is supposed to notify us of that. And we have had an increase in firefighters that have actually committed some crimes and things like that, anything from DUIs, child abuse, spousal abuse, stuff like that. So those things we need to be able to investigate, and sometimes the local jurisdictions won't turn the information over to us as freely as they would to an investigator, and sometimes we need to investigate it and make sure that if we're going to take somebody's certification away, or even if it's a department that something happens with, and we're going to affect that department's certification and compliance, or that individual's, we need to be on good legal footing before we do that, and we need someone on the staff to do that. I actually, from the time that we talked in November, I think it was, I changed a little because in going back and really looking at it, this person will actually need a vehicle, so we'd need to add a vehicle to that. So I actually took that money out of the second part of the request, which would be, so we would need $25,000 for vehicle, but the second part of the request is $175,000 to give stipends to people who do testing for us, the proctors and monitors and evaluators. All over the state, we're responsible for testing people statewide for about 30,000 firefighters. And when the economic downturn hit, we lost about 30% of the budget. Part of that money was the money that we had in the budget at that time to pay the evaluators and things with. The reason we would like to be able to at least give these people something to replace their something for their time and something to replace their
their expenses, because in some cases, these people drive several hundred miles to evaluate for us. And a lot of departments pick up some of that cost, but it would be good if we could actually pick those evaluators and put those particular evaluators where we need them, rather than letting the departments evaluate their own people. That's not always a good thing. So, all right. The next thing's in the packet, and that's all of the monies that we would be requesting. The next thing in the packet is how we handle the fireworks tax grants. Courtney had told me that y'all might have some questions about how that was done. The council initially establishes a time frame for the grants. When the applications are brought in and when we receive them and when that time frame is up, then we make sure that all of the applications and the departments that have submitted applications are compliant departments, that they're doing the things they need to do. They meet all state laws, and they have the insurance, the cancer insurance they need. They have they're reporting to the fire marshal's office, all those kind of things. We make sure of that. Then once that's done, then we have a grant committee made up of individuals from across the state that meet, and we present the grants to them. They make a recommendation on who receives the grant, how much they receive, and then that recommendation is taken to the council, and then the council makes the final decision. And then there's a time frame in there to where there's a copy of the application back behind this. There's also a copy of the acceptance letter that we send out that tells the department everything they've got to turn back into us at each step along the grant process.
Director, is there a way that can we use, you have 10%, you're allocated 10% of the fireworks revenues, and do you know how much that was last year? That's for
the 10% that we asked them to put in?
No, I was understanding that y'all not retain 10% for administrative services?
Oh, that was, that's the first time we've actually done it. We didn't do it in 18, we did it this year, and that was $24,000, I think it was. Right at that.
Okay.
Yes.
And could any of that be used for either to help out with the website, because you're going to have some of your grant information on the website, or alternatively to help out with the investigator, because it says in your report you want to use that?
Yes. Anytime, the answer is yes, it could be. I mean, we could take that out if we needed to. I guess we made the decision early on that unless we actually needed to, or we wouldn't take any more money out of it than we needed to, because we want to give as much money out to the fire service as we possibly can.
Okay, all right.
But yes, anything that we could do that could help statewide with the fire service, yes, that could be done.
A question from Vice Caucus Chair Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here today. When you the 24,000, I think what I'd like to get a hold on is the money that we've received from the sale of fireworks. Are you saying that 10% of that revenue comes in to Firefighter Standards and Training Council?
Yeah.
Or is that the total that we've earned, or help me understand, how much did the state of Georgia receive in revenue from the sale of fireworks?
I don't know the exact figure, but what we got in 2019 would be about $800,000.
To the Firefighter Standards and Training Council?
To the Standard and Training Council.
So
yes.
2019.
So they just trued up in 2019, and we've got we originally had like $240,000, just to use round figures. And when the truck came and adjusted 19, we got $585,000, I think it is, on top of that. Now, that $585,000 has not been used yet. What we've got to do between now and the end of fiscal year 19 is go back and reissue grants for that money.
Absolutely, okay.
Yeah.
And so, help me understand because the 24,000, that's 10% of, I'm trying to visualize in my mind, the 10% of.
That was 10% of that original $240,000.
Okay. So we're working off of that number, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not off of the total amount received.
Okay.
So we get 40%. Trauma centers get 55%, and somebody else gets 5%. I don't remember who, to tell you the truth.
Local governments get, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that point of sale, or is it just all local governments?
I think it's all local government.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. So out of the 40% that you received, so during last year you'd gotten about 585. Is that right? Somewhere right in that number.
Last year?
Yeah, the amended budget.
2018. The first money we got was $168,000, and we used all of that money and awarded 20 grants with that $160,000, $68,000.
But the amended 19 budget showed about 580 some odd thousand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so of that 585, you're able legally, you can retain 10% for administrative services, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we can, yes, sir.
So that would mean you could keep $58,000 for administrative services. And so what I'm asking is could we use that money? Your requests are more than that would allow, but can we use some of that money, or can you use some of that money to help offset some of the requests that you're making to the committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We could.
Okay. No, it's just helpful because we got to. You're asking, the OPB didn't make any recommendations for us to consider from the state, and I appreciate you coming and telling us, look, I need this. You asked for the website last year. You asked for the stipend for for your testing officers, and I think you asked for the investigator as well. So what we'll do is we'll look at that, but we also want to know what revenues are coming in from the fireworks, and can that be applied to help offset some of those requests?
Yes, sir. I think we could offset the website stuff if we needed to. Yes, I will tell you once again, we don't want to pull any more of that money out than we have to for expenses, so that we can award as much money as we possibly can to the fire service, because we have departments out there that need a lot of stuff, and when you look at the grants are awarded on a needs basis. So what you actually need to fight a fire with is you need hose, you need nozzles, you need trucks and waters. And if you look at what we got in 19 with the $585,000, that would be about $800,000. That might buy 2 fire trucks if we bought fire trucks. But we stay away from that because we try to buy the things that they actually need, like turnout gear, self-contained breathing apparatus, fire hose, nozzles, those kind of things that they use for personal protection and stuff. The kind of want things that'd be good to have, like thermal imaging cameras and those kind of things. We haven't gone into buying those kind of things yet, just simply because we're trying to fulfill those other needs first.
Gotcha. It makes sense. Representative Gravel, anything else?
Yeah, I would just follow up and say thank you, Director. I think it's good knowing, and I want this money because I am fully aware of some of these volunteer departments are having bake sales a lot of times to purchase vital equipment. Going forward, we don't have to have it today or the next couple of weeks. It's going to take some time to possibly prepare that, but maybe an itemized list of exactly what breathing app, here's the grant money that came out, here's the department that it went to in the county, and then it went to pay for 15 breathing apparatus and stuff like that. Courtney's got that
Courtney's
information.
got that. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
See, you asked and you received.
I would expect nothing less,
And we had,
especially working with Courtney.
just to give you an example of
Well,
Like,
Mr. Director, and I'd love to go into all the examples, but I see at least 4 gentlemen up here that would like to be courteous to their Valentines tonight.
add me to it too.
And I have Chairman Ballinger is also getting on to me, so.
I know one that really needs to.
Yeah, exactly.
The ladies want to be equally as courteous, so that
Oh, that's right, that's
I
right.
get to vote for him.
You can just keep those guys hanging. So if you don't mind, we're gonna wrap it up. Is there anything else that you need to ask us for?
Okay, well, if y'all have any questions, please, get in touch with me, ask, and I appreciate y'all
Well,
consideration.
let me let all the ladies and gentlemen go, feed the fire of passion tonight with their Valentines. Thank you.
On the subject of fireworks.
Do what?
Yeah, set off a bang.
Y'all have a good
All right, so what we'll do as a committee, just so you'll know, we're gonna, we'll take all this information in here and we're gonna digest that information and we will work on trying to pull all this into one analysis for you. And then we'll try to get that out to you just as soon as we can. And Courtney and I are gonna work on that tomorrow. And with that, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you for being here.